Despite possessing perhaps the most powerful military armament in the world, the United States military has pursued and allegedly continues to pursue diverse warfare options from beyond the physical realm. Among them, a $20 million program to assess possible uses of psychic or extrasensory perception activities, otherwise known as ESPA. Taking place within the Stargate project, many of these trials and tests remained hidden from the general public until the Freedom of Information Act brought them to light in 1995. Among the most prominent of these attempts were remote viewing activities that sought to uncover intelligence from deep within Russia, using only the minds of American soldiers stationed in the continental U.S. The idea to integrate extrasensory espionage and psychic warfare techniques into the Army was not a uniquely American project. In fact, the start of this practice may have been traced back to Germany during World War II, when the scientific organization Ahnenerbe, led by Heinrich Himmler, devoted an entire branch to study supernatural phenomena. This secret program was uncovered by the United States during a raid of his property in 1945. It mostly consisted of a collection of magical artifacts collected from conquered nations and peoples, as well as unusual discoveries from archaeological expeditions from around the world. The Soviet Union also happened to gain access to the archives from the project during this time, and so the two new superpowers began fearing what the other may accomplish by studying paranormal and extrasensory activities. While the full degree of seriousness with which the USSR considered these matters is relatively unknown, the intelligence community in the United States did consider the supposed pseudoscientific powers to be a serious matter. One of the few Soviets to rise to prominence with claims of psychic abilities was Nina Kulagina, who had been part of a tank regiment during the Second World War. She was studied by Soviet scientists after allegedly being able to move objects with her mind. The most alarming reports came from a 1970s laboratory experiment, where she supposedly manipulated a frog with her mind, eventually stopping its heart. Many accused her of fraud, and when skeptics reviewed footage of her powers of manipulation, they suggested she was simply relying on tricks. One of the earlier examples of extrasensory activities from the US military took place during the Vietnam War, when some troops took witching rods in an attempt to divine the locations of Viet Cong tunnels. Since the mission was of high priority, and morale was low, the military found it acceptable to integrate this unusual technique for the search. Scientific reasoning was seemingly cast aside during the mission. It's difficult, if not near impossible, to fully assess the success of using witching rods, since many of the tunnels remained hidden, and the ones found were often revealed by a number of coinciding factors. Later, as the fears driven by the space race, Cold War, and new waves of terrorism soon began to take hold of military planners and civilians alike, the question began to arise about whether intelligence agents could use their minds to foresee, prevent, or even counter an attack. In the late 1970s and 80s, the majority of the extrasensory projects that the CIA and Department of Defense delved into sought to test and apply remote viewing, or RV. This type of psychic skill attempts to gather impressions, clues, images, or other information about an unseen, miles-away target through nothing other than mentally applied extrasensory perception. The term remote viewing came from physicists Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ from the Stanford Research Institute, and they worked hard on having it be differentiated from clairvoyance, which was seen as an illegitimate skill at the time. At first, they worked through private funding from the Institute of Noetic Sciences and the Parapsychology Foundation, and their paranormal investigations often focused on test subjects who were perceived to be possessing an innate talent for RV. As the CIA became interested in their work, their operations expanded to official government facilities in collaboration with the intelligence agency. One test subject, a secretary named Rosemary Smith, took part in a small project run within Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. At the time, the US government was looking for a Soviet bomber that had fallen in the African jungle. Satellite images and CIA intelligence had failed to locate the satellite, and in 1976 it was decided to give the RV operation a chance to look for it. Rosemary Smith believed she had psychic powers, and according to journalist Annie Jacobson's book Phenomena, The Secret History of the US Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis, Rosemary, quote, was able to draw maps that pinpointed where this aircraft was within a few miles. Using this information, she successfully guided a paramilitary unit in the search for the crash site after they found a villager carrying a piece of the aircraft in the area she had pointed them to. Yet not everyone was sold on the idea of funding an extrasensory project for American intelligence. Representative Charles Rose, the chairman of the Intelligence and Oversight House Subcommittee, spoke out about this possibility, saying, quote, "Some of the intelligence people I've talked to know that remote viewing works, although they still block further research on it, since they claim it is not yet as good as satellite photography. But it seems to me that it would be a hell of a cheap radar system. And if the Russians have it and we don't, we're in serious trouble." Following the logic of the congressman, an official extrasensory perception activity operation was launched in October of 1978 on the orders of Major General Edmund Thompson, who genuinely believed in the prospect of the undertaking. Of it, he said, quote, "I never liked to get into debates with skeptics, because if you didn't believe that remote viewing was real, you hadn't done your homework." The project was overseen by Lieutenant Frederick Holmes Atwater, a self-reported psychic headhunter, until 1987, with the understanding that it would be an inexpensive and passive undertaking. The program, codenamed Grill Flame, was carried out at Fort Meade in Maryland. It was run with support from Major General Albert Stubblebine III, who was eventually in full control of the project. Major General Stubblebine strongly believed in the promise of what remote viewing could deliver to the intelligence community. It's thought that it was only because of him that the project survived, since skepticism existed within the military as it transitioned the project out of the budget to make it only a Defense Intelligence Agency endeavor. As stated in a declassified summary released by the CIA from 1981, quote, "Grill Flame is an Army and DIA jointly financed effort to study novel intelligence collection techniques that will help to identify the capabilities and vulnerabilities associated with paranormal phenomenon having military applications." The team of supposedly psychic individuals was small, at no time larger than 20, and worked out of buildings 2560 and 2561 at Fort Meade, as well as makeshift wooden barracks. While many of their practices focused on uncovering Soviet intelligence, they also tried to locate U.S. war prisoners in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, with varying degrees of success. One of the more promising RV sessions happened in September 1979, when the National Security Council asked for information on a naval Soviet base. The viewers were given a sealed envelope containing a photograph of the base. One of the viewers reported mentally accessing images of a building by a shoreline smelling of industrial products. Within the building, he could see a coffin-like weapon which he described as having shark-like fins. Surprisingly, a few months after the experiment, satellite imagery confirmed that the USSR had built a ballistic missile submarine at the base, the Akula, which translated from Russian means shark. This particular incident inspired the book by John Ronson, The Men Who Stare at Goats, and the subsequent film adaptation. Two other high-priority projects that were undertaken by the members of Grill Flame were the attempted location of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi and Manuel Noriega, the military dictator of Panama. As Gaddafi was not captured until the 2011 uprising, it suffices to say that locating him through RV was unsuccessful. As for Noriega, he evaded capture as the members of Grill Flame tried to find him for 3 years. Noriega was only later discovered after he had been granted sanctuary at the Holy See's embassy in Panama. The projects and experiments regarding remote viewing were and continue to be largely criticized for their lack of scientific rigor or support. The viewers were never told whether they had any degree of success, as it was believed that this knowledge might interfere with their morale, and therefore their powers. Throughout its years of activities, the U.S. Extrasensory Project went through several different code names: Scan 8, Grill Flame, Gondola Wish, Center Lane, and Sunstreak, and all of them were later housed under the name Project Stargate. Aside from remote viewing, the participants also delved into psychoenergetics, which seek to affect or communicate with a person, animal, or object placed remotely. The results of RV, psychoenergetics, and other pseudoscientific methods have been questioned, as some of them appear to have been tampered with, rendering them untrustworthy. Adding to the mostly failed attempts at RV, the leadership of the project began to alienate those around them. Stubblebine became increasingly fascinated by more rare and unlikely pseudoscientific possibilities. He would host spoon-bending parties for officers, where alleged telekinetics and psychoenergetics would bend silverware into other shapes. He believed this supposed power could be applied to destroy enemy machinery and weaponry. The Stargate project was terminated in 1995, when the CIA released a report confirming and concluding that no applicable use had been found from these practices for intelligence operations. The release also stated that the data provided by the program was inconclusive, and often vague or irrelevant. The report raised concerns that the leadership of the project may have tampered with the results, so the project could continue. Due to the Freedom of Information Act, most of the documents pertaining to Stargate have been released by the CIA and are accessible to the public, totaling almost 12,500 documents. Yet the United States may not be done with research and development of extrasensory perception activities. In 2014, the Office of Naval Research launched a $3.85 million program to explore intuition, inspired by a number of incidents, including one in 2006 from the Pentagon, claiming that Staff Sergeant Martin Richburg had used it to stop an improvised explosive device. A naval program manager, Commander Joseph Cohn, referred to it in an interview with the New York Times as a sixth sense or spidey sense that alerted them to an impending attack or IED, or that allowed them to respond to a novel situation without consciously analyzing the situation.
This is Anakin Skywalker, the most powerful Jedi of his generation, the fastest, the strongest. He is the best there is, perhaps the best there will ever be. The HoloNet calls him the hero with no fear, but fear lives inside him anyway, chewing away at the firewalls around his heart. Children on Tatooine tell stories of the dragons that live inside the planet's twin suns, those that power everything from starships to pod racers. But Anakin's fear is another kind of dragon, a cold kind, a dead kind, but not nearly dead enough. Years ago, a minor mission had brought them to a fringe system, one so immeasurably old that its star had long ago turned into a frigid dwarf. Anakin couldn't remember what the mission might have been, but he'd never forgotten that dead star. It had scared him. Stars can die? He knew then that everything dies, and in time, even stars burn out. This is the kind of fear that lives inside Anakin Skywalker, the dragon of that dead star. Every day he wrestles with his dragon, but for all his strength, he can't push back. He's losing, and nothing can stop the ancient, cold, dead voice within his mind that whispered in his darkest moments, "All things die." But within his agony, an invisible hand stretched outward, and he found her, far away, alone in the dark. And for an instant, he was her. He was the beating of her heart, and he was the motion of her lips, and he was her soft words as though she spoke a prayer to the stars. And her purity, and her passion, and the truth of her love flowed into him and through him. And every atom of his being screamed to the Force, "How can I let her die?" The Force had no answer for him. The dragon did. All things die, Anakin Skywalker. Even stars burn out. Now, no wisdom of Yoda's, no teaching of Obi-Wan's, not one scrap of Jedi lore came to him that could choke the dragon down. But there was an answer. One he had, for years, hidden from sight. Anakin stopped. His agony evaporated. It was simple. All he had to do was decide what he wanted. The dragon again tried to whisper a failure, of weakness, of inevitable death. But with one hand he caught it, crushed away its voice, and broke its power with a single effortless twist. "I am Darth Vader," he repeated, as he ground the dragon's corpse to dust beneath his mental heel, as he watched the dragon's dust and ashes scatter before the blast from his furnace heart. And you are nothing at all. He had become, finally, what they had all called him, the hero with no fear. This is Anakin Skywalker. This is Darth Vader. This is the fear of the dragon. But then you open your eyes, and the first dawn of light in your universe brings pain. The light burns you. It will always burn you. You can hear yourself breathing. It comes hard and harsh, and it scrapes at nerves already raw, but you cannot stop it. You cannot even slow it down. It is only when you start to speak, and another voice speaks for you, that you remember. You remember all of it. The dragon that brought forth Vader from your heart to slay, the cold venom in Vader's blood, the furnace of Vader's fury, and the black hatred of seizing her throat to silence her lying mouth. And there is one blazing moment in which you finally understand that there was no dragon, that there was no Vader, that there was only you, only Anakin Skywalker. that it was all you. Is you. Only you. You killed her. You killed her because when you could have saved her, when you could have gone away with her, when you could have been thinking about her, you were thinking about yourself. It is in this blazing moment that you finally understand the trap of the dark side, the final cruelty of the Sith. Because now, yourself is all you will ever have. You rage and scream to crush the shadow who has destroyed you. But you are so far less now than what you were. You are more than half machine. You are like a painter gone blind, a composer gone deaf. You can remember where the power was, but the power you can touch is only but a memory. Now the shadow is all you have left, because the shadow understands you. The shadow forgives you. The shadow gathers you unto itself, and within your furnace heart, you burn in your own flame. This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker. Forever.